Good morning. It's May 18th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with a warning from the U.S. over North Korea's possible launching of its first spy satellite. Washington says the North's launch of a satellite would violate multiple international sanctions. Take necessary steps to hold the regime accountable in case of such a move. In their second round of talks, Seoul and Tokyo failed to narrow the gap in opinions on the South Korean delegation's trip to Fukushima to inspect wastewater there. That has prompted concerns about complications for the trip next week. And the world could see a 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming within the next 5 years, the World Meteorological Organization warns. The climate threshold is due to heat-trapping pollution and the looming El Niño weather pattern. We begin with Washington's reaction to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's inspection of the regime's spy satellite. The U.S. says the launch of such a satellite by Pyongyang would violate multiple international sanctions. According to U.S. State Department Deputy Spokesperson Bidan Patel on Monday, the U.S. will make sure it takes necessary steps to hold North Korea accountable if the North does go ahead with the launch. He added that ballistic missile technology could be used to launch a satellite into space, violating UN Security Council resolutions. The spokesperson then said the U.S. has long made clear its pursuit of denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula and dialogue with the North without any preconditions. South Korea and Canada celebrated their 60 years of diplomatic ties on Wednesday with a summit between President Yoon Suk Yeol and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau here in Seoul. Our presidential office correspondent Kim Do-yeon has the details.
South Korea and Canada vowed to expand cooperation on key areas as President Yoon Suk Yeol hosted his Canadian counterpart Justin Trudeau for a summit on Wednesday. This is centered around 5 key areas: global order, security, economy and innovation, climate change, and culture. Security especially took a major step forward.
우리 두 정상은 작년 12월 양국 방산 군수 협력 양해 각서가 개정되고 올해 4월 양국 간 비밀 정보 공유의 범위를 방산 분야까지 확대하는 비밀 정보 보호 협정에 관한 협상이 개시된 것을 환영하고 양국 간 방산 협력 확대를 위한 지원을 계속해 나가기로 했습니다.
The two also penned a memorandum of understanding on exchanges for key natural resources and minerals. According to the joint statement, this MOU will further cooperation towards strengthening and securing supply chains for clean energy and critical minerals. This could be due to South Korea's strength in battery and automobile production and Canada's abundant natural resources.
For Canadians, it'll mean more investment, more trade, and more research and development in our country. Together, it'll mean benefiting our workers to develop clean and reliable solutions like next-generation electric vehicles to power our net zero future.
Another agreement was for the younger generations as there will be more working holiday visas available for Koreans. President Yoon has always put South Korea's relationship with Canada as one of his priorities for diplomacy. In fact, they met multiple times in the past year of Yoon's term, and last September, Canada was the first country that President Yoon visited solely for a bilateral meeting when the two's relationship upgraded to a comprehensive strategic partnership. And this visit completes the exchange of visits between the two countries as they celebrate the 60th anniversary of the diplomatic ties. Yoon touched upon the long history as well.
이번 총리님의 방한 기회에 한국과 캐나다가 함께 피를 흘린 혈맹이라는 점이 다시 국민들께 알려지는 그리고 우리가 이것을 다시 되새기고 잊지 않는 계기가 되기를 기대합니다. 자유, 인권, 법의 지배라는 보편적 가치에 기반한 양국의 전통적 우방 관계는 이제 미래지향적인 협력 관계로 도약하고 있습니다.
And with the growing uncertainties around the globe, including the war in Ukraine, they vow to work together.
But even as we celebrate that past, we must allow ourselves to be inspired and strengthened by the resolve shown in the past, because we are facing times of incredible challenge and complexity right now and into the future.
In the meantime, this summit kicks off President Yoon's busy week of diplomacy as he goes to Hiroshima to attend the G7 summit. This will be followed by visits from the German Chancellor as well as EU leaders next week. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The U.S. has confirmed that Washington is looking to have trilateral talks with South Korea and Japan on the sidelines of G7 summit in Hiroshima. According to National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, speaking to reporters on board Air Force One en route to Japan, such a meeting is basically a matter of scheduling. He added that there is goodwill on all three parts to do it, particularly to recognize the real progress that has been made between South Korea and Japan with U.S. support. But he did mention that nothing has been confirmed due to Biden's packed schedule. Officials in Seoul had previously said the three leaders will likely hold a trilateral meeting. South Korea and Japan have held a second round of talks to reach an agreement on the details of the Fukushima wastewater inspection, now only to finish their talks without any tangible outcomes. Our Kim Jung-sil has the details.
The second working-level talks between South Korea and Japan were held online on Wednesday. Some of the details that couldn't be agreed at last week's first meeting were discussed again, only for the two sides to fail to reach an agreement. A South Korean foreign ministry official said both countries will continue communicating through diplomatic channels after reviewing Wednesday's meeting. South Korean media outlets have reported that it's possible the agreement couldn't be reached because Japan refused to disclose some key information. Last Friday, the South Korean government sent a detailed request to inspect some of the key facilities regarding the release of the Fukushima wastewater. Seoul's requests are aimed at looking into the entire process, from how it's kept, how it's purified, and the final release. But Japan has declined these requests, saying there needs to be further internal discussions. South Korean Prime Minister Han Duk-soo told reporters on Wednesday that it is the IAEA and Japan's job to inspect the wastewater on site and that South Korea will check their inspection process.
I believe it's most important to judge the rationality of what the IAEA is doing and what Japan is doing.
However, experts in South Korea are voicing concerns, saying the original inspection plan won't be conducted properly, as there won't be any wastewater samples and only limited access to facilities and information. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk Yeol's involvement in overseas diplomacy continues in his second year in office, with his attendance at the G7 summit in Hiroshima this weekend. He'll be the fourth South Korean leader to attend a G summit. For more, let's turn to Professor Kim Hyun-wook from Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you for having me here.
Good morning. President Yoon Suk Yeol is set to speak at an expanded session of the Multilateral Forum in Hiroshima. First, Professor, how significant is this? I mean, how does presence at such an event say about South Korea?
Well, I think this is the fourth time the South Korean president participates in the G7 meeting. Of course, not as a member of G7, but as expanded members. But there are more expanded members in addition to South Korea. I think 8 countries are invited to G7 meeting this time. So I guess there will be other speech as President Yoon speaks at the expanded session. So I think, one important thing, the agenda that has come up before this Hiroshima G7 meeting is, what if South Korea becomes additional member of G7, making it G8? But the U.S. Senior level bureaucrat said that there's not much discussion about that because, I think, Japanese would not really support South Korea becoming a member of the G8, and all other countries like Australia, India, and Brazil, they might want to be members of G7 if South Korea wants to join it. So it seems like it's not something that can happen in the near future. But I think, continuously being invited as an expanded member of G7, I think means that South Korea is becoming more and more important member in the international community, centered around the G7.
Right. Maybe it is too early to form a G8 yet, but speaking of delivering a speech at the expanded session, President Yoon is expected to speak on global issues, food security, healthcare, and climate change. What can we expect from his speech there? I mean, how do these topics matter to South Korea?
I think, this time G7 meeting in Hiroshima, I think pretty much have a lot of issues to deal with. You mentioned it right that food security, climate change, and healthcare issues are very important. But in addition to that, now the war in Ukraine, how to deal with it, how to end the war in Ukraine, and how to deal with the Taiwan Strait issues. All those issues are something that is very important for G7 members. But I don't think South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol will touch upon some sensitive issues like Taiwan Strait issues much, but rather talk about some issues like food security, healthcare, climate change, which I think is generically very significant issues for now. There was some media report that there were requests to President Yoon Suk Yeol to talk about the rule of law, which can be applied to the regional issues, especially Taiwan Strait issues. But I don't think this is something that we have to deal with at the G7 expanded meeting.
Right. President Yoon expected to touch upon more general global issues like climate change and the Ukraine crisis. And also another topic to keep an eye on is the nuclear disarmament. I mean, what details on that topic will be discussed in Hiroshima this time, Professor Kim?
Hiroshima has such a symbolic significance, which has been victimized by the nuclear explosion. A lot of people have been victims, including South Korean people. So I think this time the G7 meeting at Hiroshima is really a symbolically good place to talk about disarmament, nuclear disarmament. Now, after the Putin's remarks on the usage of its nuclear weapons, I think the issue of nuclear weapons usage is pretty much widespread. And even in the Asian region, we know that North Korea already become a nuclear state, and South Korea is worrying about nuclear disparity in the Korean Peninsula. We are asking the United States to bolster our nuclear umbrella, and we know that South Korean public opinion, shows that almost more than 70% of South Korean people prefer South Korea to be nuclear. So I think, and also in addition to that, Japanese government and Taiwanese government are worrying about the possible use of nuclear weapons by China in case of Taiwan contingency. So.
Hello, it sounds like we are having some technical difficulties. Professor Kim, it looks like we just got disconnected. All right, thank you, Professor Kim, for your insight this morning. There is yet another climate warning, this time from the World Meteorological Organization. The world will likely warm up by 1.5 degrees Celsius within the next 5 years due to human activity and the El Nino weather pattern later this year. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
According to the World Meteorological Organization on Wednesday, the world is likely to see global temperatures rise by over 1.5 degrees Celsius in the next 5 years.
There's a 66% chance that we would exceed 1.5 degrees during the coming 5 years. And there's 33% probability that we would see the whole coming 5 years exceeding that threshold 1.5 degrees, which is, of course, not very likely to happen.
The WMO has been publishing its estimates on the likelihood of the 1.5 degrees threshold being broken in the next 5 years since 2020. The estimate has increased from 20% then to 50% in 2022. According to the organization's chief, the latest assessment doesn't necessarily mean the world would surpass the long-term warming threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius from the pre-industrial era. However, he says the world is still moving in the wrong direction. Experts, too, are saying the warmer temperatures, while worthy of concern, are likely only a temporary shift beyond the limits set out in the 2015 Paris Agreement. And the primary cause, according to scientists, is human activity and the associated rise in carbon emissions. However, they also cited the El Nino weather patterns that's set to arrive this year as being a factor. They remain optimistic, though, saying there is still time to ease global warming by limiting carbon emissions. Still, the WMO predicts a 98% chance that one of the next 5 years will be the hottest on record, and any move to improve the situation must be done now before it's too late. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea is now less than a week away from the third launch of its homegrown space rocket, Nuri. Now, based on the 2 test flights, Nuri this time takes on its first ever mission with real satellites on board. Our Lee Kyung-eun has a story.
The third launch of the Nuri rocket will use the same rocket using the first and second launches. The country's first ever homegrown spacecraft, Nuri, meaning world in Korean. It's a 3-stage rocket developed to put satellites into low orbit. The first and second stages are the boosters that help the rocket blast through the Earth's atmosphere. The third stage contains satellites and it will release them at the target altitude. And that is where we find the significance of this third launch. Previously, Nuri was topped with dummy satellites or a verification satellite, all meant to test the rocket's capabilities. But this time it will be carrying 8 satellites on actual scientific missions. That's why the third launch is dubbed the Nuri's landmark, first mission with first passengers on board. Next generation satellite, the second, is the main satellite among the 8. It operates on solar energy and needs a particular orbit to get the energy it needs. And the entire launch process is tailored for its transportation. First, the blast-off time. It is set for 6:24 p.m., unlike 4 p.m. in the previous launches. That's precisely calculated in order to put the main satellite into that orbit. This is why it is not an option to change the launch time like in the first launch. Any next attempt will have to come on the new date at the same time. Next, the target altitude. It is set at 550 kilometers, just high enough for the satellite to conduct its mission, unlike 700 kilometers, set for previous capacity test flights. This time, Nuri is also offering a better service. It's directly taking the passengers, the satellites, to their destinations. The main satellite will be separated first, then the rest every 20 seconds. All this will take 923 seconds. That's a lot shorter than the 2 weeks it took during the previous launch when the verification satellite carried the other satellites and released them. Lastly, this will mark a critical first step for South Korea's private-led space endeavors, with Hana Aerospace, which will be in charge of future launches of Nuri, on site for technology transfer. 이경은, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin with the Ukraine Black Sea grain deal, which has been extended for another 2 months. The extension was announced on Wednesday, just one day before it was due to expire. The deal allows Ukrainian ships transporting much-needed grain for the world to travel through a region of the Black Sea that's controlled by the Russian Navy. Russia initially seemed unwilling to agree to another extension due to sanctions by the West, which Moscow says are a barrier to its own shipments of fertilizer and food. The deal brokered by the UN and Turkey was made in August last year, initially lasting 3 months. It has already been extended once, and it's now set to expire on July 18th. Turning over to Italy now, thousands of people have been evacuated from their homes amid deadly flooding and landslides in the northern region of Emilia-Romagna. At least 9 people have been killed in the disaster that was triggered by a heavy rainfall on Tuesday. Some areas received half their annual rainfall in just 36 hours. 21 rivers are reported to have burst their banks, and 37 cities and towns have been affected. The flooding comes after a months-long drought hit the area, making land less capable of absorbing water. And according to Italy's Civil Protection Agency, worse may come as rainfall is expected to continue. This weekend's Formula One at Imola has also been cancelled. Now, Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle allege that they were relentlessly pursued for 2 hours by paparazzi in New York. According to reports, the couple and Meghan's mother on Tuesday local time left an awards ceremony in an SUV when the chase started. They reportedly stopped at a police station until the situation calmed and left in a taxi. But they were still being followed and were forced to return to the station. They eventually got home in a limousine. According to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, the pursuit resulted in multiple near collisions with other vehicles and pedestrians. New York City police have confirmed that there was a transport incident involving the couple and numerous photographers. There were no reported collisions, injuries, or arrests.
Good morning. It has been unbearably hot for the last few days with strong sunshine. And today's rain brings welcome relief from the early scorching heat. While those in southern and eastern parts of the country, including Daegu and Gangneung, will have highs that are about 8 to 10 degrees lower than yesterday. Right now, rain clouds are dropping heavy rain on Jeju, Jeollado, and Gyeongsang-do provinces. In mountainous regions on Jeju will see downpours of more than 100 millimeters, and the south coast to see 10 to 40. The rest of the country will receive spotty showers through tonight. While top readings for Daegu and Gwangju will be just at 21 degrees Celsius this afternoon, Seoul and Chuncheon notice highs dropping a few degrees, hovering in the mid-20s this afternoon, and decent air quality expected nationwide. Rain on Jeju should let up around dawn before letting up by tomorrow afternoon in the south coast. And sunshine and warmth should return to the capital area on Friday. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. Thanks for watching.